In the year 1100, Byzantine scribes recorded something strange. A people called the Albanoi appeared in official documents, not as invaders, not as migrants. They were just there. No origin story, no conquest, no grand entrance into history. And their language? It baffled everyone who heard it. It was Indo-European, like Greek and Latin, but it matched nothing else. Not Slavic, not Romance, not Germanic. It stood completely alone. Today, Albanians speak Europe's most isolated language, a linguistic orphan with no close relatives. But here's what makes this truly strange. In 2023, scientists analyzed over 6,000 ancient genomes from across the Balkans. The results showed that modern Albanians have lived in the same mountains for over 3,000 years. Let me repeat that. Genetically ancient. Historically invisible until the Middle Ages. How does an entire population exist for millennia and then suddenly appear in the historical record as if they'd been hiding? If you're fascinated by lost histories and DNA mysteries that challenge everything we thought we knew, subscribe, because this story gets stranger with every genome. The study was published in bioRxiv in June 2023. Lead researcher Josif Lazaridis from Harvard analyzed genetic data spanning 8,000 years of Balkan history. And what he found raises an even darker question. Who are these people hiding from? Here's what the DNA revealed. Modern Albanians descend from Roman-era Western Balkan populations. That part makes sense. But their paternal DNA, the Y chromosome passed from father to son, goes back much further. To the Bronze Age, to a people ancient Greeks and Romans called the Illyrians. Josif Lazaridis, the Harvard geneticist who led the study, put it simply, Albanian paternal ancestry shows continuity from Bronze Age Balkan populations, including those known as Illyrians. Now, here's where it gets strange. Between 500 and 800 CE, the Balkans were hit by massive migrations. Slavic tribes flooded south. Germanic groups pushed through. The entire genetic map of southeastern Europe was redrawn. Greeks, heavily mixed with Slavic ancestry. Bulgarians, almost entirely Slavic. Serbs, Croats, Macedonians, all genetically transformed. But Albanians? They show only 10 to 20% admixture from these migrations. 80% of their paternal ancestry predates the migration period entirely. According to the 2023 study, 3 haplogroups dominate Albanian DNA. E-513, found in 27 to 35% of Albanian men. J2B-L283, found in 15%. And R1B-Z2103 are found in 12 to 14%. All 3 were present in the Balkans since the Bronze Age. Every neighboring population was genetically reshaped by invasions. Albanians were not. Why? The Albanian DNA project RENJET, which collected 1,322 voluntary samples, confirmed these findings in December 2025. 72 to 77% of Albanian paternal lineages trace back 2,500 to 4,000 years. But the answer to why they survived lies buried in a grave from 2663 BCE. And what archaeologists found there changes everything we know about Indo-European migration. Northern Albania, a site called Chinamak. Archaeologists uncovered a burial mound. Inside, a single male skeleton. Carbon dating: 2663 to 2472 BCE, Early Bronze Age. DNA analysis revealed something remarkable. 70% of his ancestry came from a population called the Yamnaya. The Yamnaya were steppe nomads from the Pontic-Caspian region, modern-day Ukraine and southern Russia. Around 3000 BCE, they began one of the largest migrations in human history. They brought horses, wheeled carts, advanced bronze weapons, and they spread Indo-European languages across Eurasia. From Ireland to India, the Yamnaya reshaped the genetic landscape of half the world. David Reich, a professor at Harvard and one of the leading geneticists studying ancient DNA, said this: "We find in Albania, Bulgaria, Croatia, Serbia, people who genetically appear to have been transplanted from the steppe. The Yamnaya brought their DNA, their culture, their language. But here's the twist. In most of Europe, Yamnaya ancestry mixed, blended, and diluted over time. In Greece, Yamnaya genes contributed to the Mycenaeans. But later, waves of migration changed the population again. In Northern Europe, Yamnaya ancestry is strong, but it merged with local hunter-gatherers and Neolithic farmers. In Albania, the Yamnaya ancestry arrived, and it stayed, isolated, unmixed. Albanian mountains became a genetic time capsule, preserving Bronze Age lineages that vanished almost everywhere else. The 2023 bioRxiv study confirmed this. Modern Albanians retain higher levels of Bronze Age Balkan ancestry than any other population in the region. But if Albanians are the last Illyrians, why did their language disappear from history for over 1,000 years? Let's talk about the gap. The term Illyrian last appears in the historical record in the 7th century CE. The term Albanian first appears in the 11th century. 400 years of silence. What happened in between? The language itself gives us clues. Albanian is full of Latin loanwords, but not just any Latin. It contains loans from both Western Latin, spoken in Dalmatia, and Eastern Latin, spoken in areas like Dardania, modern-day Kosovo. This suggests Albanian speakers moved across a wide area during the Roman period. But genetically, they stayed in the same place. They also have ancient Greek loanwords. Contact with Doric Greek began in the 7th century BCE. Contact with Latin began after Roman conquest in the 2nd century BCE. Yet the core grammar of Albanian remains completely unique. It doesn't fit into any Indo-European subcategory neatly. Linguists propose it may be related to Greek or Armenian, but only distantly. It's a separate branch. Alone. So here's the theory. During Roman and Byzantine rule, coastal Albania was urbanized. On cities like Durrës and Apollonia became Roman. People there spoke Latin or Greek. But in the mountains, Albanian survived. The Kumani Kruja archaeological culture, dated between 500 and 1100 CE, shows a local, non-Slavic population in northern Albania. They used burial practices that trace back to earlier Illyrian traditions. No Slavic place names. Latin ones survived instead. The population was there, speaking their language, practicing their customs, but they weren't writing it down, and they weren't building empires, so historians ignored them. Medieval European chronicles mention Albanians as fierce mountain warriors, but DNA reveals they were guarding something far older than anyone realized. Let's go deeper into the DNA haplogroup E-Vi13. This is the most common paternal lineage among Albanians. About 28% of Albanian men carry it. In Kosovo, it peaks at 40%. The common ancestor of all EV13 carriers lived approximately 4,900 to 5,100 years ago. That's the Bronze Age. E-513 is found in ancient Illyrian, Thracian, and Dardanian remains. It spread across the Balkans during the Bronze and Iron Ages. According to a December 2025 study published by Balkan Academia, E-13 diversity centers in the Balkans. Not Anatolia, not the steppe. The Balkans. This is an indigenous Balkan lineage that became dominant during the Indo-European expansion, now haplogroup J2BL283. This one first appears in the Serbian Bronze Age around 2100 to 1800 BCE. Then it spreads westward. By the Iron Age, 50 to 70% of males along the Adriatic coast carried J2BL283. A 2022 study by Patterson examined 18 samples from Middle Bronze Age to Early Iron Age Croatia, historical Illyrian territory. In our almost all males belong to J2BL283, the same lineage found in modern Albanians. Finally, haplogroup R1BZ2103. This is the steppe marker. Direct link to the Yamnaya. It ties Albanians to the horsemen who brought Indo-European languages to Europe. The oldest R1b sample from Albanian territory was found at Chinamak, dated to 2663 to 2472 BCE. Now here's the remarkable part. These three lineages, EV13, J2, BL283, and R1BZ2103, all experienced a sudden diversification explosion between 500 and 800 CE, exactly when historical Albanians emerged. This wasn't random evolution, this was a population bottleneck, a refuge event, possibly a last stand. Between 500 and 800 CE, Slavic tribes poured into the Balkans. Modern Greeks show heavy Slavic admixture. Bulgarians are majority Slavic. Serbs and Croats carry significant Slavic ancestry. But Albania, only 10 to 20% Slavic influence, and most of that is in the northern regions. DNA from medieval Albanian burial sites, places like Shtike and Kenete, shows continuous local ancestry. The population didn't flee. They didn't assimilate. They held the mountains. Why? Geography helped. Albania is rugged, mountains and valleys that are difficult to invade and harder to hold. But there's more. Albania never had a centralized kingdom that could be conquered in one blow. It was fragmented, tribal, clan-based. Slavic invaders took cities and plains. But mountain clans? They endured. Albanian folklore preserves traditions that predate Christianity. Nata e Buzmit, the night of the Yule log, celebrated around the winter solstice, a festival marking the return of the sun, the worship of fire. The god En, so linked to the Vedic fire god Agni, the thunder god Perendi, and his consort Prende, the love goddess. These are Indo-European traditions, Bronze Age echoes. Compare this to the rest of Europe. Imagine being the only Native American tribe that genetically survived European colonization intact. That's Albania in the Balkans. But survival came at a cost. While their neighbors built empires, Albanians remained invisible. Until one DNA project changed everything. In 2015, a group of volunteers launched the Albanian DNA project called Renjet, which means roots. The goal was simple. Collect Y-DNA samples from Albanians across all regions. Compare them to ancient DNA and modern populations. By December 2025, they had 1,322 samples. The results confirmed what academic studies had suggested. 72 to 77% of Albanian paternal lines trace back 2,500 to 4,000 years, to Bronze and Iron Age Balkan populations. The exact populations ancient sources called Illyrians, Dardanians, and Dalmatians. But the project revealed something even more profound. Albanian-specific subclades of E-13 were found in ancient remains from Hungary. Avar-era burials, medieval warriors. They were also found in ancient Greek mercenaries from the Battle of Himera in Sicily, dated to 480 BCE. What does this mean? Albanian genetic signatures spread widely across the ancient Mediterranean, but they only survived in Albania. Everywhere else, these lineages were absorbed, diluted, lost. The Renjet project also mapped tribal lineages. The FIS system, Albanian clans. If families discovered their Y-DNA matched ancient Illyrian burials from 2,000 to 3,000 years ago. Not symbolically, directly. Albanians aren't maybe descended from Illyrians. Genetically and culturally, they are the Illyrians. But one question haunts researchers. If Illyrian DNA survived, why didn't the Illyrian name? Here's the uncomfortable truth. Illyrian. Thracian. Dacian. These were Roman labels, probably not self-identifications. Ancient Illyria wasn't a unified nation. It was dozens of tribes, the Dardani, the Taulanti, the Albanoi, the Dalmatai. They spoke related dialects, shared some customs, but they didn't think of themselves as one people. The Albanoi tribe was first mentioned by the geographer Ptolemy in the 2nd century CE. They lived in central Albania, just one tribe among many. So what changed? It's Roman conquest. In the 2nd century BCE brought political unity. Latin became the language of administration. Christianization in the 4th century CE introduced new cultural practices. Then came the Slavic invasions in the 6th and 7th centuries. And by 800 to 900 CE, something new emerged. Not Illyrians, Albanians. What unified them? A shared language, a surviving Proto-Illyrian dialect that became Albanian, a mountain refuge, geographic isolation that protected them from assimilation, and a common heritage. Bronze Age ancestry passed down through clans and tribes. The 2023 BioRxiv study found that Y chromosome diversification among Albanians peaks between 500 and 800 CE. This is a population bottleneck. A founder effect. When a population shrinks and isolates, certain genetic lineages become dominant. This is what happened to Albanians. Not a migration, a transformation, from fragmented Illyrian tribes to a unified Albanian identity. The Illyrians never vanished. They just stopped calling themselves Illyrians. Let's put this in perspective. Most European populations are genetic blends. Germans, Celtic, Germanic, and Slavic. English, Celtic, Anglo-Saxon, and Viking. Greeks, Ancient Greek, Slavic, and Turkish. Albanians, majority Bronze Age Balkan ancestry. Minor Slavic admixture. No major foreign genetic input for 3,000 years. The 2023 study used a method called identity by descent, or IBD. It compares modern DNA to ancient DNA to see how many segments are shared. Modern Albanians share IBD segments with early medieval Albanian samples from 800 to 900 CE. The continuity is over 99%. Think about what that means. Wajul, imagine meeting someone whose DNA is 75% identical to a Viking skeleton from 800 CE. That's what Albanians are to Bronze Age Illyrians. This level of genetic continuity is globally rare. Basques in Spain, Sardinians in Italy, a few isolated indigenous groups. That's the company Albanians keep. And here's the paradox. Albania sat at the crossroads of empires, Roman, Byzantine, Ottoman, yet it remained genetically isolated. How? The answer isn't conquest, it's survival. But this genetic fortress raises a final, unsettling question. Why 400 years of silence? From 700 to 1100 CE, Albanians existed genetically, but not historically. Theory 1. Albanian speakers were dismissed as Romanized Illyrians by Byzantine chroniclers, not worth mentioning separately. To Byzantine administrators, they were provincials, mountain folk, are not a distinct people. Theory 2. Literacy collapse. Local populations spoke Albanian, but they wrote in Greek or Latin. No Albanian written records survive from this period. The earliest surviving Albanian text dates to 1462. Theory 3. Deliberate isolation. Mountain tribes avoided Byzantine and Slavic conflicts. They became historically invisible by choice. Now, here's something strange. In southeast Italy, an ancient people called the Messapians lived from around 600 BCE onward. DNA from Messapian remains shows haplogroups J2BL 283 and R1BZ 2103, the same as Albanians. Did Illyrian migrations reach Italy? Were Messapians early Albanians? Language samples are too fragmentary to confirm, but the genetic link is undeniable. For modern Albanians, these DNA studies validate centuries of cultural memory. So historians dismiss the Illyrian connection as myth, nationalism, wishful thinking. But the genomes don't lie. The greatest mystery isn't what we've found, it's what's still buried. Here's what we know. Albanians are Bronze Age Balkan populations who survived massive migrations genetically intact. They carry the DNA of Yamnaya horsemen, Illyrian warriors, and Roman-era mountain clans. Their language is a linguistic time machine, preserving Proto-Indo-European features lost elsewhere. But here's what we don't know. Why did Albanian DNA diversify specifically between 500 and 800 CE? Were there other Albanian refugees that didn't survive? What role did Albanian mercenaries play in spreading Balkan DNA across Europe? New excavations in Kosovo, North Macedonia, and Montenegro are underway. On each burial site could reveal more Illyrian Albanian genetic links. The bigger picture: Albanian DNA challenges the migration theory of European history. Survival, not conquest, can define a people. Every Albanian alive today carries genetic echoes of Bronze Age warriors, Roman soldiers, and medieval mountain clans. Their DNA isn't just history. It's a 3,000-year-old message written in chromosomes. And we're only beginning to decode it. What other lost peoples are hiding in plain sight, waiting for DNA to tell their story?